Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. Love to build drawers and casework. When it comes to how to build that case, I like to miter those top corners. I've got a spline that I use. I think you're going to like. Stay with me. I'll show you. I'm Rob Cosman, and welcome to my shop. We make it our job to help you take your woodworking to the next level. If you're new to our channel, be sure to subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and don't forget to turn on the notification on your mobile device so you'll know every time we release a new video. Good? All right, back to the bench. So as I mentioned, I love to build chests of drawers. I have lots of examples of it throughout my house. Most of my kids have chests of drawers that I've made. There's lots of ways to do it. Of course, overall, it just has to be nice and strong so that everything stays in place, nothing moves, doesn't rack. So the drawers can then be fit like a piston. Some examples, here's one, a small sample where it's dovetailed. Takes a little bit of extra work, but it's fine if that's what you want, meaning you want to be able to see the open joinery. Here's an example over here of one where the top overhangs. Again, another example. But what I want to focus on today is one that allows a little more creativity. And by that I mean you can make your own veneer. So if you have a really nice piece of veneer, it's fun to be able to take it and start the grain at the bottom and come up, go across the top and down the other side. And when you're dealing with veneer, there's very little loss between where this piece ends and this piece starts. So you can actually follow the grain as it wraps around. Now, if you're going to do that, you've got to use some kind of a substrate. I prefer MDF. It's a very stable product, nice and flat, makes a great substrate for plywood, for veneer. What the challenge becomes is how are you going to strengthen what obviously has to be a mitered joint, and that's what I want to walk you through. So I've got one over here that's actually in the open stage. I use these, I came up with this idea, and I'm sure I was influenced by somebody, and I apologize for not being able to give credit where credit is due, but I don't remember. It involves a series of 1/4-inch splines, and the way you do it, everything lines up perfectly, so when you put that together, the result is an extremely strong corner that the whole piece would have to be destroyed in order for it to come apart. And I've even got a very unique clamping system, and I'll walk you through all of that. But when that's lined up and that miter closes perfectly, makes for a really great joint. So for this particular cabinet, I need a piece that is 32 inches long going vertical, and then 29 3/4 coming across the top. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to go up 32, and then right from there I'll go across the top. So it'll look like it's just a continuation of the grain. The problem is I've got to have this miter bang on. So rather than try to handle an 8-foot piece, I'm going to cut this down first. This is the outside edge. I never like using it just in case it's absorbed a bit of moisture. It's usually been beat up enough that I don't want that. So first thing I have to do is cut a piece that's going to be manageable. So I'm going to use my sled to do that. And we'll get rid of, when you buy this particular, they give you an extra 1/2 inch. So this is MDF core maple plywood. So I can easily get rid of at least 1/4 inch, but I'm going to get rid of, yeah, 1/4 inch will do. So I'm going to cut a piece that's 32 1/4 first, allowing me to trim that end. I'll use my sled to do that. I've got a really nice crosscut blade in there. All of this is important if you want really clean miters. I like to have that blade fairly high so that the teeth are coming down on the veneer instead of almost a cut that is horizontal. That has a tendency to lift fibers. So a little more dangerous, but as long as you know where the blade is, you're okay, meaning you avoid it. So this is going to give me 1/4 inch that I can cut off of that end. Make sure that's tight to the fence. I try not to go fast when I'm making these clean cuts. Now I need to remember that this is where I'm going to continue cutting to get my second piece. I'll trim this back almost to 32. Actually, I'm going to go right to 32, and then when I do my miter, I'll cut right on the point. Some people worry about this. Nothing to worry about as long as it's securely held here. All right, that's going to be the top end. The next piece is going to be 29 3/4. Now we'll line these up and mark them. I've got to switch out and put in my 45-degree sled. Okay, so we can see how the two pieces go together. I'm just going to put a triangle on there so I can easily match those up. So we need a 45 on this piece, and we need the opposite on there. So I always like to just come in and draw those. Doesn't have to be exact, just so that when I'm fumbling around with the pieces, I know which one I'm going to do, or which angle I'm actually cutting on. So I've got a sled with minimal slop, meaning it doesn't slide in the miter slots. I've got a really good blade on there that'll cut nice and clean. I'm going to line this up, and I will probably go into it a few times, meaning I'll move into it to make sure that it's cutting right on the point. And then I'll make one relatively slow cut and hopefully not have to touch it after the fact. Now I've already gone in and made sure that my blade, when wound over to 45, is actually at 45 degrees. Now I'm going to just keep moving that over until that blade is cutting right on the point. Okay, point of my miter is right at the corner, so that one's good. Nice clean cut. As long as you continue and don't stop partway through, if you've got a sharp blade, you can usually get a nice enough surface on there that you won't have to worry about going in and doing anything to it, and you can actually join right from there. I've got a 1/4-inch spiral bit. I've got it set so that I'll show you in comparison to the veneer. It's going to be about a 1/16 of an inch below. I want to get it as deep as possible just so I have maximum glue surface, but I don't want to be too close to that veneer. Yeah. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to mark on our fence where the router bit is. So what I've done is I moved a block of wood over so it touches and drew a line up on this side and then do the same thing on the opposite side. So there is my router bit. Now what I need to do is transfer where my miter starts on the inside out here to the top. So I'm going to get a sharp pencil and a square. So on each side, find the inside corner and transfer it to the face. And you'll see why we need to do this on both pieces, on both sides. Now we want to determine how many splines. I like to have one close to the edge to keep that miter tight. If you don't have, the only thing to take into consideration if you were going to do some kind of a edge routing to this, you'd want to take that into account. You might have to move your spline in a little bit. This is actually going to be the back side, and this is going to have a 1/4 inch band of maple added to it. So for that reason, I can stay fairly close. So we'll go, first one will be right here. And we'll just flip it over so that we get the exact same one over there. With just one setting, we get 2 cuts. And let's put one in the middle. So if we will have one here. And I think if we put one in here, which would be right there. So that'll give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think that's plenty. So our first one is going to be a 1/4 inch away. So I'm just going to turn that bit and set my fence. So there's a 1/4 inch gap between the far side of the router bit and the fence. So I'm going to turn this on. I've got my vacuum attachment. And I'm going to carefully, now you move when you're routing with a straight bit like that, one way is going to feel controlled, another way is not going to feel as controlled, but you've got to do both with this. So you just want to hold it firmly, lots of resistance. If you need to, you could even come in here and put a stop on the opposite side where this needs to go. In fact, let's go ahead and do that just for the sake of making it a little bit easier and a little more controlled. If you're not comfortable with your router, this is the method. It's going to be a lot more controlled. However, it's also going to be a bit of a pain because it's going to have to be moved so many times. But I'll show you how to do it, and then I'm going to take it off and I'm going to do it what we might call freehand. So I'm lining up the far left side of the cutting circle of the bit with that line. I'll put my block right there. Secure it to my fence. And to make it a little bit easier next time, I'll just put a line up here, and then I'll have to do the same thing on the other side. But I'm only going to be able to do 2 cuts per, and it means taking that on and off several times. So you'll see how much of a irritant it is. Keep that tight to the fence, down tight to the table. Back it off. So there's your cut right on the inside. Then with that same setting, now we have to take it off and set it on the other side. And we've got to move this for every cut, which obviously is going to be more work than I want to do. Instead of trying to remember to cut the last one so that it's in the same spot, and what I mean is if we were to only do one more, we would have to make sure that we do reference from the same side on both. So I'm just going to add a second one. So we'll put a double in the middle. So we'll go over 4.5 inches. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our monthly newsletter has subscriber-only content, discounts monthly on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. Now, if you look real close, you'll see that I went a little bit too far on a couple of these. On this one, it's not going to matter because the inside is not going to be seen, but you have to make sure that you don't make mistakes like that if, indeed, you're going to see the inside of the case. Now, our next move is to make some splines, I'm going to use, you can use anything actually, hardwood, softwood, doesn't matter. I'm going to use a piece of pine. Now I'm going to cut a little bit into this. I've got it set for just about a quarter. So I'll cut about that far. Then I'm going to go over to the bandsaw and just knock that off so that I can fine tune that fit. A little too fat. This is a lot easier than cutting the whole strip and then trying to go back and handle such a small piece. That's actually a little bit too loose. That's too loose. Okay, that's much better. That'll fit and stay in there. I'll do a second one just in case we need a little extra. This is a fair bit of extra work, but if you want the absolute maximum amount of gluing surface, what you want to do is go in and we're going to quarter round, well actually we're going to half round this spline material. So that long grain edge will be rounded over like that. And then one at a time, we'll also round over the end grain. So when we put these two together, you'll have the rounded part up in here and the rounded part up in here, and it'll give you the absolute maximum. You could actually do it with a plane too, or you could just ignore it altogether. Probably don't get a whole lot of extra benefit with doing it, but I'm going to set up the router table and we're going to do it just to show you. So I took a piece of scrap MDF, I cut a slot in it that'll allow me to cover the router, but get really close. And I need to move this over until it just is on the same plane as that bearing. And that looks pretty good. Sometimes the height's difficult because that radius is so small, but we'll try a sample and make sure that it's not leaving a ridge. Pay attention to the direction so you can see the arrows, so you want to go against it. So that's too high. See how we've got that ridge right there? We need to drop it down a little bit. Okay, so we'll go ahead and route that. So that gives us our radius. Now we've got to do the ends, but we need a block or something to help keep it in line when we pass it over that bit. Next thing we have to do is determine how wide this piece needs to be. So I'm going to slip that in and sink it as far back as I can. And then look and see where the end of that, right there. So now I'll go and I'll rip this to that width. Okay, so now we can take that, put it in. Actually, I got to put a mark on here first so I can see. Put that in there. Mark that. So now it's just going to be a matter of cutting these pieces off, route it, cut the next one, route it. I'm going to use my bench hook, and I'll put this stop in here. And to speed things up a little bit, I can use both ends. So I'll go ahead and make this cut. And before we process a bunch of them, we'll check it to see if it's going to work. That's a little bit close. Better make it a little bit shorter. We want it to be, cannot go beyond the point of that arrow. But if we're a little bit short, that prevents us from getting into a situation where it keeps the joint from closing. So I'll just move this over just a little bit. Lock it. Now I'm going to go ahead and process both ends. So we only have to turn this router on half as many times. I want to make sure that this is going to fit. So these are just dry, but they're in place. And I made sure that you can see a little bit of the flat on the end of each of them, so that should keep it from holding it apart. So I'll tap this together. I may need to use my clamp. And it's really nice when this lines up. Every one of them lines up perfectly. Now we may have a couple that are a little long and maybe not. No, I think that's just right. That'll pull nice and tight. I'm going to put my clamp on just to be sure. And I'll show you how that works. It allows you to pull across the joint. So that's what the clamp looks like, made out of a piece of wood. And I've got sandpaper glued to the side. We want to have, if you can draw a line that would be square to that flat surface, and you want it to come right through the middle of this joint. So set that right about there. Put these clamps on the inside. Depending on what you're going to see on the inside, you may need to protect that surface from pressure of the clamp. Pull that nice and tight, and one down the bottom. If we can get that in there somewhere. Okay, that's pulled tight. And that looks great. Now we'll just grab a square and check the inside. Okay, that looks good. Now when gluing these in, I try to be careful not to get any glue anywhere on the actual miter. Remember, this is just so that these pieces are already attached to one section. I'll just put a little bit on this.
On the bottom.
Yeah, even though it's end grain, we'll put a little on there. And put that in place. Make sure that that's in tight. We'll go through and do every one of these. I'm not going to glue this together because this is not ready to be assembled. But glue all of those in. You don't worry about losing them. And like I said, when it comes time to actually gluing up, you simply just have to apply glue to all of this side. Put it together, put your clamp on, and it works great. That'll be as stronger than the material itself. So if it ever fails, it's because the entire board failed. Anyway, great system. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the plane and chisel icon below, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our in-person and online workshops.